Hello students and welcome to week 12. Week 12 brings us to chapter 12 in our text, Inspiring Change in Human Service Clients. So some questions to consider as you're reading this chapter. Why do people change? Is there a common process that people go through to change? What is motivation? Why is motivation important in the change process? Can motivation be enhanced? What is motivational interviewing? And what are the principles and methods of motivational interviewing? So the question that really covers the span of this chapter is change really that hard? And so instead of focusing so much on techniques of change, perhaps what we should be focusing on is more of the why people change and by what process do they change. And so looking at the process of change, research has shown that most people find it very difficult to change their habits. And so think of something even small, maybe just a minor, irritable habit that you have that you don't like, and you've kind of maybe questioned yourself, why can't I stop doing this? Or maybe something in someone else. One example I have is from the time I was very young, I always bit my fingernails. I always had my fingernails in my mouth, kind of chewing my nails. And it was very hard to quit. And, even after I quit actually biting my nails, I would always have, kind of my nails up to my mouth, which of course, can help lead to us getting sick very easily and things like that. And so, if anybody has ever tried to quit smoking or quit drinking or, quit saying a certain thing or anything like that, change can be really hard. And so first we're going to look at through the process of change, we're going to look at the stages of change model. And so this is sort of the prevailing model of what change looks like. Of course, this is probably not going to cover everything, but it is the one that is most often cited and used. And so this comes from Prochaska, DiClemente, and Norcross, and they have several books that have been put out there on this stages of change model. And so this group of scientists studied how people alter their behavior, suggesting that this is sort of the natural process of change. It appears that the process people go through to change their behavior is the same whether they accomplish it on their own, participate in some type of treatment, or use a structured approach. And so this is called the stages of change model. From start to completion, the 5 stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And in some cases, a 6th step will be included called relapse, because what we recognize is that with any behavioral change, there is the potential to relapse, and we need to normalize that so that when we do have relapses or other people have relapses, we can encourage them to step right back up and get into play again. So one of the things that your textbook does really well is it defines very briefly each of these stages and has a very short case that shows a person in that stage of change. And so I definitely want you to take a look at that. That is beginning on page 195 of your text into 197. And so we're going to go through each of these one by one, but of course, your textbook is going to have a little bit more information. So to begin, we have the pre-contemplation stage, which is when an individual has no immediate intention to change. And so pre-contemplation is this one at the top, no intent on changing behavior. Next, an individual may move into the contemplation stage where they start to seriously consider change. And so they're aware that a problem exists, but they have no commitment to change, or maybe they're not sure exactly what needs to change. Next, we move into this preparation stage. This is where individuals intend to modify their behavior. And so they want to do something and they begin to think about what they could do to change this behavior. Next is the action stage, in which behavior change starts to begin. And so, in preparation, we've thought about what we want to do, and in action, we take steps to make that change happen. And then the final stage that they identify is maintenance over here. So sustained change, new behavior replaces old behavior. And so sustaining and strengthening the gains that you've made. But again, as I said, we need to recognize that relapse can be a part of this pattern as well, that we will often fall back into old habits. And instead of giving up, what we need to do is go right back into the pre-contemplation and use this upward spiral, right? And so each time we go around, it's going to be faster. So, you know, when you look at something like substance or alcohol addiction, perhaps they've spent years at the pre-contemplation phase, and maybe there have been times throughout, you know, the last year or so where they've gone into contemplation, but preparation has only begun within the past maybe couple months, and they've only started to take action now. Maintenance comes after they've done some type of treatment or support or something like that to change the behavior. But those relapses may happen. And so what we need to do is, instead of spending years again at pre-contemplation and taking just as long to go through this process, is to move through this faster. So I've had a relapse. And so, you know what? Maybe this is a problem. Maybe this is something that I need to do something about again. And these are things that worked last time. And so let me engage in those again and identify some new areas that I can try so that I can maintain that old behavior, or that new old behavior of not using anymore, and kind of going through the cycle potentially a number of times on our way to sustained and long-term changes. So what are some of the factors that influence change outcomes? And so there's a number of them. One reasonable predictor of change is how successful someone feels they will be in modifying their behavior. This is often called self-efficacy. And so it's a belief in your own abilities to be able to do something, which can then become a self-fulfilling prophecy in which you live up to your own expectations, whether they're good or bad. And so if I have a lot of self-efficacy for which, you know, I want to quit smoking, say, then I'm going to have a higher likelihood of being able to do it because of that self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know what, I can do this. Whereas if my self-efficacy is very low and I don't have a lot of faith in my ability to do it, then most likely that self-fulfilling prophecy is that I'm not going to be able to achieve that. But not only can your own sense of self-efficacy predict the outcome, but others' positive or negative beliefs about your ability can also have an impact. And so if the human service worker, the person that you're engaged with, has a strong belief that you can change, that can make all the difference in the world. And so the human service worker style of interaction with a client can affect the outcome. So Carl Rogers suggests that counselor empathy is a critical skill for facilitating change that can have significant influence on a client's response to treatment. And so you will learn about Rogers a lot more in future courses. But empathy coming from the human service worker will make a huge difference. Also, what a client might say about change during counseling can foretell whether changes will occur. So making sure that you're paying attention to the things that they're saying, maybe verbally, or even things that they're saying with body language and other behaviors, can let you know what the potential outcome might be. And then finally, it seems that large changes can come from even relatively little counseling. And so there are brief interventions in short-term counseling that can have great outcomes similar to those resulting from longer-term treatments. And so this is important to think about, is that, you know, with the right amount of motivation, self-efficacy, you know, a lot of empathy and care being given your way, those changes can happen in a relatively short amount of time. So motivation to change. Most clinicians would agree that people change because they're motivated to do so. Motivation is a key component in recovery from a variety of disorders, and it can be defined as a state of readiness to change. It reflects the probability that a person will enter into, continue, and adhere to a specific change strategy. And so when we look at Miller and Rolnick, this can kind of go up and down, right? And so a lack of motivation is also one of the biggest challenges facing human service workers when they're working with other individuals. First, change has to be important to the person. And so they have to feel like this is something that is very important for me to do. Also, self-regulation theory suggests that as long as one's behavior is consistent with their value system, no change is likely. And so if they feel like this behavior is consistent with the value system that I've set for myself, then I'm less likely to change than if it goes against my value system. Second, the client has to feel confident that they are able and capable of change. And third, they need to be ready to make changes happen in order for change to take place. And so ambivalence becomes a factor. More often than not, people feel two ways about their behavior. They simultaneously want to change while also feeling a level of comfort or satisfaction or seeing benefits of not changing. And so ambivalence is a normal part of the human experience and a natural stopping place of sorts on the path toward change. It is essentially a conflict in which you feel both attracted to and resistant to something at the same time. Another aspect of ambivalence is the theory of psychological resistance, which suggests that the attractiveness and occurrence of a behavior that others deem problematic will increase if the person believes his or her personal freedom is challenged or threatened. And so if you tell me I have to change or else this, and this, then I may feel some level of my personal freedom being infringed upon and maybe actually less likely to change because of that. And so understanding the dynamics of ambivalence can be helpful in understanding the sometimes confusing responses of people who are faced with choices about change. Ambivalence can be immobilizing, and someone who is stuck may be accused of being unmotivated, when in reality, they're just feeling very ambivalent. So what is the human service worker's role in client motivation? Most people who enter the helping profession have a strong desire to fix things, to make them right, and to offer comfort where you can. It would seem that this desire to fix things may in fact actually work against the human service workers at times. Motivation can be understood as an interpersonal process, and thus it appears that human service workers' behaviors may actually decrease a client's motivation for change. So what do we do about that? So Miller and Rolnick also identified what is called motivational interviewing. It's a person-centered directive method for enhancing intrinsic motivation to change by exploring and resolving the level of ambivalence. And so first and foremost, it's a manner of being with the client that reflects what might be thought of as 4 values of motivational interviewing. And so if we go back to the stages of change, what we can do to help a client move from pre-contemplation to contemplation, contemplation to preparation, and preparation to action is using motivational interviewing and help them to resolve some of the ambivalence that is preventing them from moving forward through that process. And so the 4 values of motivational interviewing include knowledge of the natural process of change, which we talked about with the stages of behavioral change. Collaboration, and so working together with your client instead of doing the work for them or telling them what they need to do. Evocation, the human service worker's goal is not to be the expert and to sort of bestow upon the client your wisdom or good sense, but to pull from the client resources, ideas, values, and directions needed for change, because they are truly the expert on themselves and their experiences. And in addition, we need to build upon their strengths. Next, and finally, is respect for autonomy and recognizing that clients must choose what they will do, how they will act, and if and when they'll make those changes occur. Some guiding principles of motivational interviewing include expressing empathy, developing discrepancy, so kind of identifying where a client's behavior is not meeting their needs or desires or goals. Rolling with resistance. Resistance is a sign that the client, the human service worker, is at 2 different places and want different things. So directly opposing resistance tends to strengthen it. And so we need to meet the client where they're at. And finally, support self-efficacy. And so a client is unlikely to consider change if they don't think that it's possible. And so how can we help clients to recognize that change is possible and to get those small, easy wins so that they start feeling more able to do the things that they want to do? Initial change strategies. The human service worker can use several strategies throughout the process of motivational interviewing to help the client investigate his or her own ambivalence and identify their reason for change. And the first is asking open-ended questions. And so rather than asking questions that can simply be given a yes or a no answer, asking things that they have to elaborate upon. Listen reflectively. And so being able to reflect back some of the things that maybe the client isn't saying, but you're able to pick up by their statements. You can say, it sounds like you mean that, what I hear you saying is, so that you can help the client to feel truly understood. Affirm. So affirming certain client attitudes, behaviors, and statements serves to build rapport and supports open examination of their situation. And so it can be simply thanking them for coming to appointments, thanking them for sharing, saying you appreciate, what they're doing and how hard they're working. Next is summarize. And so there are 3 different types of summary we can do. The first is a collecting summary that can be used during an early period of counseling when several change talk themes need to be pulled together. Next is linking summary. It ties together material discussed from several sessions, encouraging the client to think about how the pieces fit together. And the third type is transitional summary, which indicates a shift in the focus of counseling. The human service worker can decide what to include and not include in order to set future directions of the counseling process. And then finally, elicit talk about change. And so how can we ask evocative questions to help the client starting to talk about making changes happening? So it could be recognizing the downside of staying the same, recognizing the upside of changing, expressing hopefulness about change, and expressing an intention to change. Some strategies for encouraging more talk about change is to, again, ask open-ended questions, but this time make them very targeted. And so recognizing the downside of staying the same, what concerns do you have about your drinking? What difficulties have you noticed about your behavior? And so very specifically targeted towards that change that could potentially happen. Use the importance ruler. And this provides a very efficient, practical way to quickly determine how important a change is to a client, how confident they feel about making the change, and how ready they are to do so. And so this could potentially be on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to 100, whatever you want to use. 1 to 10 is most common, so that you can have a good idea of where the client fits on those different scales. Explore the decisional balance. And so it could be simply writing a pro-con list. Pros of staying the same, cons of staying the same, pros of making a change happen, and cons of making a change happen, and weighing those things out. And then asking for elaboration as well. So being able to ask the client to say more, talk about that a little bit further. What happens when this? What ways has this affected you? And so continue to kind of push for some more information gently. We can question behavioral extremes. So when a client does behave in extreme ways, we can ask them what would be the worst thing imaginable if change were to happen or not happen. Encourage looking back. Think about times when things were going well or things were different than they are now. And encourage looking forward. What would you like to be doing 5 years from now? How would you like things to turn out for you? What do you hope will be different if we make this change happen? And then finally, how does motivational interviewing work? The effectiveness seems to vary across different populations, problems, and providers. In naturalistic studies of client language during motivational interviewing sessions, clients will use words to reflect desire, ability, reasons, need, and commitment to express their motivations towards change. I apologize, my dog is whining. While it's important to learn the skills and methods involved in motivational interviewing, it's essential to embrace the underlying spirit and principles of this approach. Motivational interviewing is an empathic, collaborative approach in which the human service workers attempt to elicit clients' own intrinsic motivation, the motivation that lies within them, and resourcefulness for change. The main goals are to help resolve the client's ambivalence about their behavior and to increase their self-perception regarding their ability to change, and encourage the client to make an argument for change. Sometimes this is all the client's going to need to help the change process going. Other times, this may only be the beginning, where the client might require other professional help and support. And so we may be just helping them move from pre-contemplation to contemplation, or contemplation to preparation. And other services may be needed to kind of help them continue along that process. And so, as always, your textbook has a nice summary of the topics that we've covered. Some recommended readings, internet sites, which this one specifically is on, more details about motivational interviewing, and then connecting with my helping lab to engage in additional activities that can help you to engage in this material. So thank you for listening.